You're going to be just like your mother when you grow up. You're going to be a teen parent and drop out of high school. You will never amount to anything. So for Christmas, most kids get to open a new laptop, a new iPod, a book, but I got to open a pregnancy test kit. I was 13. I didn't even know what sex was. As you can see, the expectations for my success were very low. However, I always knew what I wanted to see in my future. Let's go back to the beginning, give you an idea of where I come from. For privacy reasons, I will be changing the names of the people I will be telling you about today. I was born on July 7, 1993, to two teenagers, still children. They didn't know how to be a parent, so I paid for that in my childhood. When I was about 2 years old, my parents split up for good. From ages 2 to 7, I was moving around a lot, from grandma's house to mom's house to dad's house. I never really had a stable place to live. Within this time, my mom had 2 more daughters with 2 different men, and my father had a son with another woman. At age 7, I learned what it was like to have your heart broken time after time from multiple broken promises when my dad became addicted to drugs. At age 8, my mother met Craig. That's when the hurt really began. By age 9, my siblings and I were helping maintain Craig's marijuana plants. And by 10, I had another little sister. Growing up with my mom and Craig, we knew what it was like to be poor. There would be times where the electricity and the water would both be shut off. That meant showering at the fairgrounds after hours when nobody would see, long hours at the laundromat, and lots of candles. Due to the conditions of our living, my friends' parents wouldn't allow them to come to my house. Around the same time, the abuse began. Although I saw a lot of the emotional abuse, it was very difficult for me to watch my sister get her head cracked open when she was 7 years old by my mother's boyfriend. It was hard to come home and see my 5-year-old sister on the couch barely breathing because she was punched so hard. It was hard to watch my brother, who is older than me, at 11 years old, be kicked out of the house night after night, and one night he just never came back. Meanwhile, my dad was still out of my life, only showing up when it was convenient for him. I remember this one time I was in 3rd grade, and I'm standing in line waiting to leave, to go home for the day. And as I'm walking out the door, I see my dad sitting on this bench, and I just started to cry. At 8 years old, I hadn't seen him in years. And then he promised me he'd come back tomorrow, and he never did. Currently, my mother and Craig are married. And as of this past Tuesday, Craig got arrested for a DUI of drugs and alcohol, still setting a great example for my younger siblings. I want to paint a picture of how stable life was back in the day. Craig loved his booze and his pot, no doubt about that. So after we were evicted from my grandparents' house, granted, I love my grandparents, and they did what was right. We were moving around a lot, in and out of motels, and eventually we ended up at a homeless shelter. Even at 10 years old, I knew this was wrong. It was humiliating getting off of the school bus at the local homeless shelter. Talk about some stress. But eventually the humiliation and the stress ended when Craig, due to his alcohol and his drug consumption, got my family kicked out of the homeless shelter. Yes, only my family would get kicked out of a homeless shelter. So when I was 10 years old, I overheard my little sister asking my mom for help with her homework, and my mom responding by calling her a retard. It's safe to say I learned real quick that you don't ask for help. Sitting in my college class this semester, my teacher was going over ways you do not teach your child how to do something. And one thing that she commented on was you do not teach your child how to ride a bike by pushing them down a hill, which brought me back to my childhood. I was 7, and I remember my mom and all of her friends surrounding me on this big girl bike. You know, the kind without the training wheels. This was a huge deal. I remember begging them, crying, please don't make me do it. Next thing I know, I was flying down that hill. You'd expect mom to be holding on tight to the back, right? No, I was on my own, but it did the trick. I learned that if you don't want to crash, you better steer those handlebars and work those pedals. Through all the dysfunction of moving around and being taught how to do stuff in a ridiculous manner, or in my sister's case, not taught, I always knew right from wrong, and I knew what I wanted to see in my future. However, I would not be where I am today if it weren't for a few people. One major stepping stone in my life was the Friendship Club. The Friendship Club, for those of you who are unaware of what it is a nonprofit organization to help guide girls to a brighter future. And I firmly believe that if I didn't join the Friendship Club when I was 11 years old, I would not be where I am today. A few years back, I was going over some surveys that I had done in the Friendship Club when I entered 7 years ago. And they consisted of questions like, do you think you're pretty? Do you think you're smart? Do you feel loved? No, no, and no. Why would any 11-year-old think so poorly of themselves? The answer is because when that's all you're taught or all you're told, you begin to believe it. That all changed though. After being a part of the Friendship Club for 7 years, I knew that I had a family I could go to, even though they weren't blood. I knew I was worth so much more than I was led to believe, and I had a safe place to go. Throughout my high school years, I was moving around a lot. My mom and Craig, their relationship was unstable, and so they would split up, and then we'd be living here, and he'd be living there, and my mother would go see him, and that meant she would leave me alcohol on the front porch and tell me to invite my friends over to justify that she was still with the man that was abusing my siblings and I. At first, it was just the weekends. Then it turned into weeks, and then it turned into months. Only showing up when I needed somebody to help me get groceries. I was on my own at 15 years old. So eventually, she moved us back in with Craig. And this lasted a couple months, 2 or 3, and then she moved us out again, into her friend's house. And for a week, she was there with us, and then she left my little sister and I. She never came back. It was that day that my mom and my relationship ended. So let's fast forward a little bit. Senior year of high school, I wanted to do nursing for my senior project. So I went to Jen, the director of the Friendship Club, and I asked her if she knew of anybody that I could job shadow. And she said she had the perfect woman, and that she did. It was October of 2010 that I met Wendy Weidler. Not knowing that she would change my life forever, and be more than just my senior project mentor. So as I said before, I was moving around a lot. So in November of 2010, my high school deemed me as homeless. And then February 13th, 2011, 2 ride-alongs later, the Weidler family invited me over for dinner. And they knew my living conditions. And they asked me, as we were sitting around the table, to join their family. It wasn't until that moment I felt I was where I belonged. It was hard at first, coming from this family who doesn't care what time I get home. They leave me alcohol on the front porch. And then these parents that want to see me do well, who expect so much more of me. I just had to find it within myself to know that I deserved this better life. Later my senior year came my graduation, a very important day in my life. I was walking across that stage with an ear-to-ear grin on my face, so proud that my family could be there to watch me, waving at my dad, not knowing that he was waving to say goodbye. It broke my heart as I sat back down. I couldn't help but cry, knowing that this important day in my life meant so much less to him than a job he had to get to. But it's moments like those They have to find it within yourself to know that you did all that you could do, and they're the ones that are missing out. So currently, I still live with the Weidler family. I work full-time and I go to school full-time. I have plans for my future. I am confident with the woman that I am, and I have so much that I plan to achieve and just want to pay it forward. It's crazy how the world can work in mysterious ways. This little girl born into tragedy, children having children who don't know how to be parents, a little girl who never felt she was where she belonged. And in this world that has so much opportunity for me to take advantage of, just waiting for me, which brings me to the space between. We all have our own definition of the space between. For me, the space between is me, finding it within myself to go with this world rather than this family that has so little expectations. I had to find it within myself to become all that I can be. We are all our own space in between. I urge every one of you to find it within yourself, to make a change in your life, or make it be that stepping stone in somebody else's life. Thank you.